After my divorce from my husband, my father called me a disgrace that tainted the whole family, and with the added burden of 2 children. Don't you dare even show up at our anniversary. I calmly said, "All right, Dad," and handed over the keys to the apartment. A week later, my father called in horror, because he didn't know what I had done. Sometimes it seems to me that a person can endure any pain as long as they still have hope. Hope may be tiny, almost invisible, like the first blade of spring, grass breaking through the frozen ground. But it is hope that keeps us from breaking when the whole world collapses. Even that was taken from me. I will never forget that day. My father looked at me as if I was not his daughter, the one he once carried on his shoulders and taught to ride a bike, but rather a dirty stain on the perfect picture of his life. His eyes, usually warm and attentive, seemed foreign, cold, judgmental. "You are a disgrace that taints our whole family, and with the burden of 2 children. Don't you dare even show up at our anniversary." With those words, he slammed the door in my face, the door of the apartment where I grew up. At that moment, I didn't find the strength to argue. I simply said, "All right, Dad," and handed him the keys to the apartment. The very same keys he had given me many years ago with the words, "This is your home, Anya. No matter what happens, you will always be welcome here." Now I knew that was a lie. But let me start from the beginning. My name is Anna Viktorovna Ilina, née Kuznetsova. I am 34 years old. I have 2 children. Polina, she is now 10, and Artyom, who just turned 7. 2 months ago, I divorced their father, Maxim Ilyin, after 12 years of marriage. Maxim and I met at university. I studied economics. He studied law. We had a circle of mutual friends and often gathered together after classes. He immediately caught my attention. Tall, charming, with a sparkling sense of humor and a rare kind of confidence. When Maxim walked into a room, it seemed to brighten. He could make even the grumpiest people laugh. He knew how to listen, always found the right words. I felt that, next to him, I became better, brighter, more confident. It feels strange to admit it now, but back then, I really believed it. Everyone in our group admired Maxim. Guys wanted to be his friend, girls wanted to be with him, and he chose me. Our romance developed quickly, like in a movie. After 6 months of dating, we were standing at the altar. I was only 22. I had just received my diploma and was beginning my career in a small accounting firm. Maxim was already working in a prestigious law company, and everyone predicted him a brilliant future. My father was delighted with our marriage. Maxim embodied everything my father, Viktor Nikolaevich, considered important in life: prestige, career prospects, a good family, ambition. "Finally, you've done something right, Anna," he told me before the wedding. That phrase should have warned me back then, but I was too happy to pay attention. My mother, Irina Sergeyevna, was more reserved in her assessment. "Are you sure, Anya? You know so little about each other," she asked with concern. But I brushed her off. Of course I was sure. I loved Maxim with all my heart and had no doubt that he felt the same. The first years of our marriage seemed perfect. We rented a small apartment in a residential district, gradually built our home, made plans. Maxim worked a lot, stayed late, but I understood. He was building his career, and that required sacrifice. I wasn't idle either. I worked during the day, and in the evenings I attended professional development courses. We were young, energetic, full of hope. In the 3rd year of our marriage, Polina was born. Pregnancy was not easy. I spent the last months in bed due to the risk of miscarriage. Maxim seemed happy that he would soon be a father, but his work took almost all of his time. I often stayed alone, suffering from nausea and dizziness, while he was dealing with urgent matters at the office. After our daughter's birth, everything changed. I went on maternity leave, and when I returned to work, I found my position had been taken. Management offered me a lower-paid job, and I agreed. There wasn't much choice. With a small child, finding a new job was difficult. Meanwhile, Maxime continued climbing the career ladder. He became a partner in his firm. His income grew significantly. We moved to a spacious 3-room apartment in the city center, bought a car. On the surface, everything looked perfect. A young, successful family, a healthy child, financial security. But inside our ideal family, cracks were already showing. Maxime was more often late at work, coming home after midnight. Sometimes he smelled of alcohol and someone else's perfume. When I tried to talk about it, he grew irritated, accusing me of paranoia and distrust. "I work like a dog to provide for you and our daughter, and you still suspect me of something," he said so convincingly that I began to doubt my own suspicions. I tried to believe him, convinced myself that it was just postpartum depression making me see problems where there were none. I told myself we were just going through a difficult period, that it happens in all young families. But deep down I knew something was wrong. When Paulina turned 3, I got pregnant again. It happened unexpectedly. Maxime and I had not discussed the possibility of a second child, but I was happy. I thought this was a chance to strengthen our family, to bring back the warmth and closeness we once had. Maxime reacted indifferently. "Well, since it happened," he said with a shrug. There was no joy, no excitement. It was as if I had told him about buying a new coffee maker, not about the fact that another life was coming into our family. The pregnancy was difficult, even worse than the first. Doctors insisted on bed rest from the very beginning. Paulina had to stay at the kindergarten until late, and then I had to pick her up by taxi because Maxime couldn't leave work. In those months, I felt loneliness more sharply than ever. My husband came home only to sleep. Sometimes he didn't show up, for several days, explaining it with business trips. My parents lived in another city and could come only occasionally. Friends, seeing my situation, would visit to help, but everyone had their own life and problems. The irony was that financially, we lived very well. An apartment in a prestigious district, expensive furniture, quality things. Maxime spared no money for material well-being. But at the same time, he was becoming more and more emotionally distant from us. Artyom was born a month prematurely, tiny, fragile. He was immediately taken to intensive care. I remember those days as a nightmare. The fear for my son's life, the physical pain of childbirth, and the complete lack of support from my husband. Maxime appeared at the hospital only once, stood there for 15 minutes with a bouquet of flowers, took a few photos for social media, and left, citing an important meeting. The next day, his post appeared online with a photo of him holding my hand against the background of the hospital bed. The happiest day of my life. I became a father again, followed by dozens of enthusiastic comments from colleagues and friends. That was the first time I realized the full falseness of our marriage. He was creating the illusion of a happy family for others, while in reality, we were almost no longer connected. When Artyom was 2 months old, I found messages on Maxime's phone with a woman named Diana. The text left no doubt. My husband wasn't having a mere fling. It was a full-blown affair that had lasted over a year. I started a scandal, cried, screamed, demanded explanations. Maxime did not deny it. Instead, he calmly said, "Yes, I have a relationship on the side, but I'm not going to destroy the family because of it. You are the mother of my children. With you I have a settled household, but with Diana it's different." His coldness struck me more than the betrayal itself. No apologies, no remorse. He spoke of his mistress as casually as if discussing the weather. "Either you end this relationship, or I file for divorce," I told him then. "Don't talk." "Nonsense, Anna," he replied. "Where will you go with 2 small children? How will you live? You haven't worked for how long? 5 years? Who needs you?" His words hurt more than a punch, because there was some truth in them. I really hadn't worked since Polina's birth, devoting myself entirely to family and children. I had no income of my own, no way to rent an apartment. Besides, both children were still very young. Artyom needed constant attention. And so I stayed, swallowed my pain, accepted betrayal, decided to keep the family together for the children's sake. A foolish, foolish decision that cost me 5 more years with a man who neither respected nor loved me. Gradually, our marriage turned into a strange form of coexistence. We lived under one roof, slept in the same bed, but were strangers to each other. Maxim spent almost all his time at work or with friends. I took care of the children, the house, tried to return to my profession by working part-time as an accountant in a small company. Polina grew up quiet, reserved. She learned to read early and spent most of her time with books, as if building a protective cocoon of imaginary worlds around herself. Artyom, on the other hand, was noisy, energetic, demanding constant attention. He slept poorly at night, was often sick, and most of the care for him fell on my shoulders. Maxim's parents lived in a neighboring city and rarely visited. Mine lived 5 hours away. And although my mother tried to come more often, especially when the children were ill, her opportunities were limited. My father worked himself to exhaustion, putting all his energy into the family business, a small chain of building material stores. He saw me as the heir to the dynasty, dreamed that I would get an economics degree and take over the family business. My marriage to Maxim, a successful lawyer, fit perfectly into his idea of the right career path for his daughter. In his eyes, we were the perfect family. I never told my parents about the problems in my marriage, partly out of pride, partly out of fear of disappointing my father. Every time they came to visit, Maxim and I staged a play of a happy family life. He became an attentive husband, a caring father, spoke about his professional successes, about plans for the future. No one suspected that as soon as the door closed behind the guests, we once again turned into strangers. This went on until I met Pavel. It happened at advanced training courses for accountants. I decided to refresh my knowledge in order to apply for a higher-paying position. Pavel was a lecturer, a specialist in tax law. He noticed me after I asked a few questions about complex accounting issues. After class, we started talking, exchanged contacts for professional communication. Gradually, our communication went beyond studies. We began to meet after classes, discuss not only accounting, but also books, movies, life. With Pavel, I could be myself. Not a perfect wife and mother, not the daughter of a successful businessman, not a former straight-A student, but simply Anna, with my fears, doubts, and dreams. There was no romance between us in the classic sense. We didn't hold hands, didn't kiss, didn't talk about feelings. But the emotional closeness that grew between us was so strong that I realized Maxim and I were only connected by the children and the household. Everything else had long since died. This realization didn't come immediately. There wasn't a single moment when I decided, that's it, I've had enough. It was a gradual accumulation of fatigue, disappointment, the understanding that I was living a life that wasn't my own. The last straw came on Polina's birthday. She was turning 10, and we had been planning the celebration for a long time. She wanted to invite her school friends, have a tea party with real cups instead of plastic ones, play a quest game I had prepared especially for her. Maxim promised to come early to help with preparations, but of course he didn't show up. Didn't answer calls, didn't read messages. I did my best. Decorated the apartment with balloons and garlands, prepared treats, entertained 6 10-year-old girls, all while keeping an eye on Artyom, who also wanted to join the fun. Polina held herself together, but I saw how she kept glancing at the door, waiting for her father. I saw the disappointment in her eyes as the evening ended, and Maxim still hadn't appeared. When the last guest left, my daughter came up to me and asked, "Does Daddy not love me?" I didn't know what to answer. I wanted to lie, to say, of course he loves you. He's just very busy with work. But I couldn't. Because in my child's eyes I saw such deep sorrow, that any lie would have felt like an insult. He loves you in his own way, I finally said. But sometimes adults don't know how to show their love properly. Polina nodded with a kind of understanding no 10-year-old should have, and went to her room, while I stayed in the kitchen, surrounded by the remnants of the party food, and suddenly realized it couldn't go on like this anymore. For myself, maybe I could have endured, but not for the children. They deserved better. Maxime came home past midnight, a little tipsy. When I asked where he had been, he just shrugged. Business. It was your daughter's birthday today, I reminded him. I remember, he nodded. I bought her a present. You can give it to her tomorrow. He handed me a bag from an expensive electronics store. Inside was the latest model tablet, without packaging, clearly secondhand. This is from your work, isn't it? I asked, examining the device. What difference does it make? He snapped. It's a good present. Lots of kids dream about this. But not Polina, I objected. She wanted the Harry Potter books. All 7 in hardcover. I told you about it, but sorry you didn't remember. He waved his hand irritably, too busy making money to think about books. And then I told him I was filing for divorce. I expected shouting, threats, manipulation, but Maxime reacted with a kind of weary indifference. As you wish, he said with a shrug. Just remember, the apartment is in my name. The car, too. I'll pay the minimum child support. Exactly what the law requires. And you'll have to raise the kids yourself. I'm not signing up to be a nanny. His reaction only confirmed that I was making the right decision. This man had long since stopped being my husband, my partner, my support. He had become a stranger, and there was nothing left to divide between us except legal formalities. The divorce went surprisingly smoothly. Maxime didn't seek custody of the children, didn't contest my modest alimony requests, didn't make a scene in court. The only thing he insisted on was that I move out of the apartment with the children as soon as possible. I have new plans for this place, he said during one of the meetings with the lawyers. I suspected it was about Diana or some other woman, but I didn't ask. I no longer cared. Pavel helped with housing. He found us a small but cozy 2-room apartment not far from Polina's school. He helped with the move, with paperwork, asking nothing in return, just as a friend. We began a new life with the children. It wasn't easy. Despite alimony from Maxime, the money wasn't enough. I took a full-time accounting job. I had to work a lot, often take on extra freelance projects. Polina helped look after her brother when I was late. For a 10-year-old girl, it was too much. Responsibility. And I felt guilty. But there was no other choice. My relationship with Pavel developed slowly, cautiously. He understood I needed time to recover from the divorce, that my children came first. He didn't push, didn't pressure, just stayed by my side. He helped with Artyom when he was sick, taught Polina to play chess, sometimes cooked us dinner when I came back from work, completely exhausted. The children grew close to him, especially Artyom, who barely remembered his father. For him, Pavel quickly became an important figure, someone to play football with, to fish with, to fix a broken toy car. Polina was more reserved, but even she gradually began to trust him. It was at that time, when life seemed to be improving, that I got a call from my father. Viktor Nikolaevich hadn't called me since the divorce. He didn't approve of my decision. He believed I was destroying the family over silly female grievances. When I tried to explain the real situation, he brushed me off. Everyone has difficulties, Anna. Your mother and I quarreled too, but we never even thought of divorce. I didn't tell him about Maxime's infidelity, his emotional coldness, his neglect of the children. I understood that my father would never hear or understand me, In his view, marriage was forever, no matter what. My mother secretly called me, asked how we were doing, if we needed help. I reassured her, said we were fine, not wanting to cause problems in their relationship. And then came the call from my father. I didn't recognize his voice at first. It sounded strange, tense. "Anna, your mother and I decided to celebrate our 30th wedding anniversary," he said, after the usual greetings. "There will be a celebration in a restaurant, with all the relatives, friends, business partners." "Congratulations," I replied, not understanding what he was leading up to. My father never called just to chat. Every call had a purpose. "Your mother wanted to invite you and the children," he continued, and I heard a note of irritation in his voice. "But I think it's inappropriate." "Why?" I asked, though I already guessed the answer. "Because our friends, colleagues, people who knew you and Maxim as a couple will be there. And how do you imagine showing up alone with 2 children after such a scandalous divorce?" "Scandalous?" I repeated. "Dad, our divorce was civilized. No public fights, no dirt." "Any divorce is a scandal, Anna," my father cut me off. "Especially when a woman is left alone with children. What will people think? That we raised you poorly? That we didn't teach you to value family?" I was silent, struck by how much he cared about others' opinions rather than the well-being of his own daughter and grandchildren. "Besides," he continued, not waiting for my response, "Maxime is also invited. He's now running our company, showing excellent results, and he'll come with his new wife. Handsome, successful, and you'll look pathetic next to them." Each of his words lashed me like a whip. I knew that after our divorce, Maxime had taken a job as a lawyer at my father's company. That was part of our unspoken agreement. I wouldn't demand high alimony, and in return he'd help me with housing and work for my father. But I didn't know he had already remarried. "A new wife?" I asked. "He married Diana?" "I don't know her name," my father muttered. "Some model or actress, young, glamorous. Unlike you, she takes care of her appearance." I closed my eyes, struggling with the pain of his words. Not because of Maxime and his new wife. I truly didn't care who he was with now, but because of how easily, how casually my father humiliated me, his own daughter. "So I'm just warning you," he finished. "Don't come to the anniversary. Don't shame the family even more." I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. At that moment, Artyom ran into the room, holding out a drawing he had just finished. The sun, a house, 3 figures, him, me, and Polina. A simple child's drawing, but filled with so much love, so much joy, that my heart ached. "Dad," I said calmly, looking at my son's picture, "I wasn't going to come to your anniversary. I have other plans for that day, but thanks for the warning." "That's right," he approved. "And one more thing, your mother and I decided to sell the dacha and invest the money in expanding the business. You don't have time for a garden now anyway with your job and kids." The dacha, a small plot with a cottage in a gardening cooperative an hour's drive from the city, the place where I spent all my summer vacations as a child, where I first learned to swim, where my sister and I picked berries, where my mother taught me to bake pies. "The dacha is registered in my name." I reminded him. That was true. 6 years ago. My parents had transferred the property to me, to reduce the tax burden on the main business. I know, my father replied irritably. "That's exactly why I'm calling. You need to come and sign the papers for the sale. We already found a buyer. He's offering a good price, and if I don't want to sell?" I asked quietly. My father was silent for several seconds, clearly not expecting this turn. "What do you mean?" "Don't want Anna. This is not up for discussion. We need the money to expand the network. Maxim found an excellent investment opportunity. The dacha is in my name." I repeated. So the decision to sell it is mine, and I don't want to sell it. Have you completely lost your conscience? My father was nearly shouting. Your mother and I worked ourselves to the bone for you all our lives, paid for your education, gave you expensive wedding gifts, and now when we need your help, you refuse. I listened to his angry tirade and suddenly felt a strange calm, as if something clicked inside and everything fell into place. Dad, I said when he paused to catch his breath for another portion of reproaches, I will not sell the dacha. This place is important to me and my children. We will spend summers there. And if you and Maxime need money for business, look for other sources of financing. You. He was choking with indignation. You are a disgrace to our family, a selfish woman. First you got divorced, shamed us in front of everyone, and now this, and with 2 children in tow. Don't you dare even appear at our anniversary. And then I said the words that turned my whole life around. All right, Dad, I said calmly. If that's how you feel, then perhaps I'll take back the keys to the apartment. What apartment, he didn't understand. Yours. I explained, the one where you and Mom have been living for the last 15 years. A silence hung long and tense. I could almost see my father frowning, trying to understand where I was going with this. What does our apartment have to do with it? He finally asked. We bought it ourselves, back when you were still in school. No, Dad. I gently objected. You bought it when I was 19. I was already studying at the university, and you registered it in my name to reduce the tax burden on the business, just like you later did with the dacha. Another silence. I imagined him feverishly trying to recall the details of that deal, trying to understand whether what I said was true. It was just a legal maneuver. He finally said, We paid for that apartment. It's ours. Legally, it's mine, I answered, calmly. And I think it's time to bring the legal and factual sides into alignment. Are you threatening me? His voice trembled with rage. To your own father after all we did for you? No, Dad. I'm just saying that I'm tired of your attitude of putting business money and the opinions of outsiders above the well-being of your own daughter and grandchildren. Tired of your support for Maxime, who cheated on me for years and ignored the children. Tired of you considering me a burden, a disgrace, not a person with feelings and rights. I paused, gathering my thoughts. I will not demand that you and Mom move out of the apartment, but I want you to respect my decisions, whether they concern the dacha, the divorce, or anything else. I am an adult, Dad, and I deserve respect. You will regret this conversation, he said darkly. Very much regret it. And he hung up. I stood with the phone in my hand, looking at Artyom's drawing, and felt a strange mix of fear and relief. I had never before opposed my father so openly, always tried to be the obedient daughter, to meet his expectations, not to disappoint. But now, when I myself had become a mother, when I had gone through a divorce and started building a new life, I could no longer allow him to treat me like that, for my own sake and for the sake of my children. That same evening, I told Pavel about the conversation with my father. He listened attentively without interrupting, then hugged me tightly. You did the right thing. Anya, he said, it was long past time to set boundaries. I'm afraid he really is angry and might try to harm us. I admitted he is stubborn and proud. What can he do? Pavel shrugged. The apartment really is registered to you. Yes, I nodded. And the dacha too. But it's not about the legal side. He's my father. I don't want to be at war with him. I understand. Pavel stroked my shoulder. But sometimes conflict is a necessary stage on the way to healthy relationships. Maybe after this conversation, he will begin to see you not just as a daughter he can command, but as an independent woman worthy of respect. I wanted to believe that. But deep down, I understood my father is not one of those who easily change their views, especially when it comes to control and power. A week after our conversation passed quietly, my father neither called nor wrote. My mother called once, her voice tense. She said that my father was a little upset but would soon calm down. I did not tell her about our dispute over the apartment. I did not want to put her in an awkward position between husband and daughter. And then came that very call, the call that changed everything. It was Friday evening. I had just put the children to bed and was going to do some work on the reports that were due Monday. The phone rang so suddenly that I flinched. My father's number. I hesitated for a second before answering. I wasn't sure I was ready to continue our unpleasant conversation, but still pressed the accept button. "Hello," I said, restrainedly. In the receiver there was heavy breathing. Then my father's voice bewildered, frightened nothing, like his usual commanding tone. "Anna," he said. "Anna, what have you done?" My heart clenched with a premonition of something terrible. "What? Are you talking about Dad?" "The apartment." He spoke with difficulty, as if every word cost him pain. "We received a notice from some real estate company. They write that you sold the apartment, and that we must vacate it within 2 weeks." I froze, not believing my ears. What notice? I didn't sell anything. Don't lie to me." His voice broke into a scream. "Here is your signature. The date a week ago, right after our conversation. Did you really do this? Throw us out onto the street out of spite?" I was so stunned I couldn't say a word. "Someone forged my signature, sold my parents' apartment. How is that possible, Dad?" I finally managed. "I swear I didn't sell anything. I would never do that. This is some mistake or fraud." "Fraud," he repeated with a bitter laugh. "Yes, looks like it. Only who is the fraud, you, or the one who forged your signature?" Dad listened to me. I tried to speak clearly despite the rising panic. I did not sell the apartment, did not sign any documents, and would never drive you and Mom out of your home. Never can you look at the documents. What do they say? Who is the buyer? My father was silent, then said more calmly, "Some company with a long name. They expect payment within 3 days, after which the deal will be considered complete." Anna, if this really wasn't you, then who? And then it hit me. "Maxime," I breathed. "He has access to my documents, knows my signature, and as a lawyer can easily arrange such a scheme." "Maxime." My father's voice was doubtful. "But why would he do that? He works for me. We are on good terms." That's exactly why I began to understand the whole picture. He knows about our conflict over the dacha, knows that I refused to sell it, and decided to create a problem to turn you against me. But forgery of documents is a criminal offense. My father objected. "You yourself said he is a good lawyer. Surely he found a way around the law, maybe used an electronic signature or bribed a notary." "I don't know, but I absolutely did not sign anything." In the receiver, there was silence. I heard my father's heavy breathing, imagined him sitting in his office, clutching the phone, trying to comprehend the situation. "If this is true," he finally said, "if you are not involved, we urgently need to do something. In 3 days, the money will be transferred, and we will officially lose our home." "I'll call Pavel right now," I said. "He's a tax lawyer, but he also understands real estate transactions. Maybe he can advise us on how to act." "Pavel," my father repeated. "Who is that?" I sighed. Of course, my parents knew nothing about Pavel. I hadn't told them about him, understanding that my father would not approve of my new relationship so soon after my divorce. "My friend," I answered briefly, "and a good lawyer. He will help." "Fine." My father's voice sounded tired. "Call your friend, and in the meantime I'll try to contact Maxime, find out what he knows about this." "Dad, don't tell him that we suspect him," I warned. "If this is really his doing, he will only cover his tracks." "I wasn't born yesterday, Anna," my father replied irritably. "I know how to talk to people. Call me back as soon as you learn anything." He hung up, and I was left sitting, with the phone in my hand, trying to comprehend what had happened. Someone had forged my signature and sold my parents' apartment, and that someone was most likely my ex-husband, the father of my children. I immediately dialed Pavel's number. Luckily, it was not too late. He answered almost immediately, and I hurriedly, stumbling over words, told him about my father's call. Pavel instantly switched into professional mode. "We need to act quickly. First, we'll check what kind of company the buyer is. Most likely, it's fictitious, created specifically for this transaction. Then we'll contact Roz Reister to find out whether the transfer of ownership has already been registered. If not, excellent. We have a chance to stop the deal. And if it has," I asked anxiously, "then it will be more difficult, but still possible. We will file a fraud complaint and have a handwriting examination conducted. It will take time, but eventually the transaction can be contested." His confident tone calmed me a little. At least we were not powerless in this situation. "What should I do right now?" I asked. "Right now, ask your father to photograph and send all the documents he has, every page. I need to see what we're dealing with. And ask him not to take any action before our consultation. No calls to this company, no signatures, nothing." I nodded, then quickly said, "All right. Thank you, Pavel. I don't know what I would do without you." "No need for thanks." I heard a smile in his voice. "Just don't panic. We'll figure it out." After speaking with Pavel, I called my father again, relayed Pavel's request to send photographs of the documents. He muttered something indistinct, but agreed. 10 minutes later, several images arrived on my phone. I immediately forwarded them to Pavel and began to wait. Time dragged painfully slowly. I paced the room, unable to sit still. My head was spinning with all kinds of thoughts. What if we can't stop the deal? What if my parents really end up homeless? What if Maxim has nothing to do with this, and the real fraudster remains unpunished? Finally, the phone rang. It was Pavel. "Anna, I've studied the documents," he began without preamble. "The situation is complicated, but not hopeless. The transaction was carried out through an electronic digital signature. Allegedly, you submitted an application through the Gosuslugi portal, obtained an EDS, and remotely signed the purchase agreement. But I never did that," I exclaimed. "I believe you," Pavel replied calmly. "Most likely someone gained access to your Gosuslugi account, knew your password or the answers to security questions, could have ordered a new password to his email if you didn't have two-factor authentication set up." "Maxim," I whispered. "He knew all my passwords, birth dates, pet names, all the data usually used to restore access. We were married for 12 years. We shared not only a bed but also our digital lives." "What now?" I asked, feeling my heart pounding with anxiety. "We need to act in several directions at once," Pavel replied. "First, immediately change the passwords on all your accounts, especially Gosuslugi and your bank. Second, tomorrow morning go to the police and file a fraud complaint. Third, submit a request to Roz Reister to suspend the registration of the ownership transfer." "Do you think we'll make it in time?" I asked hopefully. "We must," he answered firmly. "The transaction is not yet completed. The money has not been transferred. We have a chance to stop this mess." He paused for a second, then added, "And one more thing, Anya. You need to talk to Maxim." "To Maxim?" I repeated. "Why, if he's behind all this?" "Precisely because," Pavel explained, patiently. "If it is his doing, you need to make him understand that you know everything and are not going to sit idly by, that you will fight. Sometimes a single conversation can change the course of events." I took a deep breath. The thought of talking to Maxim filled me only with disgust. Since the divorce, we communicated only about the children, and mostly through messages. But Pavel was right. If my ex-husband was behind this scheme, I had to make him understand that his plan was exposed. All right, I agreed. I'll talk to him. Just be careful, Pavel warned. Don't accuse him directly. Don't threaten. Just say that you know about the attempted apartment sale, that you've already contacted a lawyer and the police, and that you intend to defend your rights and your parents' rights by all legal means. I nodded, then quickly said, Yes, of course. I'll be careful. After talking with Pavel, I sat motionless for a while, gathering my thoughts, then opened my laptop and began changing passwords on all my accounts. I wrote the new passwords in a notebook. Complex combinations of letters, numbers, and symbols that Maxime would never guess. When I finished, I picked up my phone and, taking a deep breath, dialed my ex-husband's number. It was already almost 11 p.m., and I wasn't sure he would answer. But after the third ring, his voice came on the line. Hello? He sounded wary. Of course, I rarely called him, especially so late. Maxime, it's me, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. We need to talk. It's almost midnight. Irritation crept into his tone. Is something wrong with the kids? No, the kids are fine, I replied. This is about something else, about my parents' apartment. A long pause. I could almost see him frowning, trying to figure out what I knew and how to respond. The apartment? What does that have to do with me? He finally said with feigned surprise. I don't know, Maxime. You tell me. I tried to sound confident, but not accusatory. My parents received a notice that supposedly I had sold their apartment to some company with my signature, which I never gave. Another pause, then a short chuckle. And you think that was me? Seriously, Anna, are you accusing me of fraud? I'm not accusing anyone, I replied calmly. I'm just letting you know that I am aware of the forgery of my signature. I've already contacted a lawyer, and tomorrow I'm going to the police to file a complaint. The fraudsters will be found and held accountable. How fierce you've become. There was mockery in his voice, but I caught a note of unease too. Keep in mind, proving that someone specific forged your signature won't be easy. Examinations, courts, it could take months, even years. And your parents have already lost the apartment. We'll see. I didn't rise to the provocation. The deal isn't finished yet. The money hasn't been transferred. We still have time to stop it. We? He repeated. You and your father suddenly best friends after he called you the disgrace of the family? I stiffened. How did Maxime know about my father's words? I hadn't told anyone about that conversation except Pavel. So, it really was you, I said quietly. You know about our conflict with my father, and you decided to take advantage of the situation. I decided nothing, he snapped. And I did nothing. I just know your father better than you think. He told me about your conversation, about how you threatened to throw them out of the apartment. I didn't threaten, I retorted. I just reminded him that legally, the apartment is mine, just like the dacha he wanted to sell without my consent. That's how you see it, Maxime sneered. But he sees it differently. He thinks you decided to take revenge on him for not approving your divorce, to sell the apartment, to throw him and Irina Sergeevna out on the street. That's not true, I exclaimed. I would never do that. And my father knows it. Now he knows. I spoke to him today. Good for you, Maxime said coldly. The weariness in Maxime's voice was evident, but it didn't concern me. I had my own life, my own worries. If your parents have problems, solve them yourselves. Maxime, I took a deep breath, trying to calm down. If you are involved in this scam, with the apartment sale, stop before it's too late. I'm not joking about the police and the lawyers. We will fight, and if it turns out it was you, you'll face real prison time. Threatening me? His voice grew icy. Bad idea. Anna, Very bad. Don't you know I have strong connections in the police, in the prosecutor's office, in the courts? Think about the children. How will they feel if their mother starts a legal war with their father? If newspapers begin writing about a scandalous trial? I was silent, shocked by his cynicism. I had always known Maxime could be tough, calculating, but I never thought he would stoop to direct threats, using the children as leverage. I'm not afraid of you, I finally said, and I won't let you intimidate me. If you are behind this scam, I will find proof and hold you accountable. Not out of revenge, but for justice and for my children, who must know their mother will not let anyone, not even their father, break the law and harm people. Maxime smirked with mockery, straight out of a novel's heroine. But life isn't a novel, Anna. In life, the winner isn't the one who's right, but the one with more power and money, and you know that. We'll see. I wasn't going to continue the conversation. Good night, Maxime. I hung up without waiting for his answer. My hands were trembling, my heart pounding. The talk with my ex-husband left an unpleasant aftertaste, but at the same time strengthened my resolve. Now I almost had no doubt that he was behind the apartment scheme. That night I barely slept, going over the recent events in my head, analyzing every word of my conversation with Maxime, trying to grasp his motives. Was he just trying to hurt me, turn my father against me? Or was there a deeper plan? In the morning, as soon as the kids went to school, I called Pavel and told him about my talk with Maxime. That's practically a confession, he agreed. Not direct, of course, but his hints, his threats. It all points to him. Now we must act fast. I've cleared my morning. Let's meet in an hour at the police station. At the police, we spent several hours, filling statements, giving explanations, providing documents. The duty investigator, a young man with tired eyes, listened attentively but without enthusiasm. We'll look into it, he said when we finished. But keep in mind, these cases take a long time, months, sometimes years. We don't have months, Pavel objected. The deal could be finalized in a few days. We must act immediately. The investigator sighed. I can send a request to Rose Riester to suspend the transfer of ownership registration, but that doesn't guarantee success. It would be better if you also apply directly as the property owner, that is, you, Anna Viktorovna. That's what we did. After the police, we went straight to Rose Riester, where I submitted a statement to suspend any registration actions with my parents' apartment. Then to the bank, where I closed all old accounts and opened new ones with higher protection. In the evening, my father called. His voice sounded tired, but less panicked than the day before. I got a call from Rose Riester, he said. They said the transfer registration was suspended because of a statement from the owner. That means you. Yes, Dad, I confirmed. My lawyer friend and I spent the whole day at various offices. I think we can stop this scam. Your lawyer is a good specialist. There was doubt in his voice. Very good, I replied firmly. And he believes Maxime might be behind this scheme. A long pause. I could almost see my father frowning, pondering my words. That can't be, he finally said. Why would he? He works for me. We're on good terms. Dad, I spoke gently, knowing how hard it was for him to accept this. Think about it. Who knows my passwords, has access to my documents, understands legal details? Who could forge my signature or obtain a digital signature in my name? And who knew about our conflict over the dacha, about your words that I was a disgrace to the family? I might have mentioned it in a conversation with him. My father reluctantly admitted. But still, that's a serious accusation. Anna, are you sure? No, not 100%, I answered honestly. But everything points to him, and I spoke with him last night. He practically confessed, though not directly. I'll talk to him, my father said firmly. I'll find out the truth. Dad, don't, I panicked, afraid he'd ruin everything. If it really is Maxim, he'll only cover his tracks. Let the police and lawyers handle this. Police? My Father snorted. They'll drag this out for years. And I have a business reputation. I can't wait until some investigator deigns to look into our case. I sighed. My father always preferred direct action, heart-to-heart talks, handshakes, deals. That's how he managed business, how he resolved conflicts. But in this situation, his straightforwardness could do harm. Dad, please give us a few days, I begged. We've already stopped the registration. Now we need to find out who's behind it. If it's Maxim, we'll have proof, and then you can act decisively. My father was silent, then reluctantly agreed. Fine. A few days. But after that, I'll take matters into my own hands. I knew I couldn't expect more from him. At least we had gained a short reprieve. After the call with my father, I felt so exhausted I could barely move. The past 2 days had drained me completely, physically and emotionally. I lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand how my life had turned into such a tangled mess. Divorce, conflict with my father, an attempt at fraud with the apartment. It seemed problems kept piling up without giving me a break, and behind them all stood one person, Maxim, the man I once loved, trusted, the one I had planned to spend my whole life with. How could I have been so wrong about him? How did I fail to see his true face behind the mask of charm and success? Or had he changed over time, from a loving husband into a cynical manipulator? I didn't know the answers, but I knew one thing. I would no longer allow him to control my life, to hurt me and my loved ones. I would fight, for myself, for my children, for my parents. And in this fight, I now had allies. Pavel, who supported me not only as a lawyer, but also as someone close to me. And strangely enough, my father, despite our differences, had still taken my side in this situation. Maybe it's in crisis moments that people's true essence is revealed. Some show their worst sides, like Maxime, and others, like my father, with reservations perhaps, but still remain family. With these thoughts, I finally fell asleep right on the couch, fully dressed. And in the morning, a new chapter of this story began. A chapter that changed everything. The ball. Phone rang early, around 7 a.m. I fumbled for it without opening my eyes. "Hello," I mumbled sleepily. "Anna, it's me." My father's voice sounded strange, tense. "Can you come right away?" I woke up instantly. What happened? "Not on the phone," he cut me off. "Come as soon as possible, and bring your lawyer too." "Pavel?" I was surprised. "Why?" "You'll find out here." And he hung up without saying goodbye. I sat on the couch clutching the phone, trying to understand what was happening. Something serious must have occurred if my father was calling this early and demanding I come immediately. But, what? After a quick wash and change of clothes, I woke the children, explained that I needed to leave urgently, and took them to the neighbor who sometimes looked after them. Then I called Pavel, told him about my father's call. "I'll pick you up in 20 minutes, he said without hesitation. The drive to my parents' house took about half an hour. The whole way I was nervous, going over possible reasons for such an urgent summons. Maybe something had happened to my mother, or maybe there were new problems with the apartment. Pavel, driving, occasionally glanced at me with concern, but asked no questions. He understood I had no answers myself. Finally, we arrived at the familiar building. I pressed the intercom button, identified myself. The door opened without question. We rode the elevator to the 7th floor, and I rang the doorbell of my parents' apartment. My father opened the door. He looked unwell, haggard, with red sleep-deprived eyes, in rumpled home clothes. "Finally," he muttered instead of greeting, letting us in. "Come into the kitchen." Irina put the kettle on. I introduced Pavel, but my father only glanced at him briefly and nodded. It was clear his thoughts were elsewhere. In the kitchen, my mother met us. She hugged me, nodded to Pavel, and began fussing with cups and cookies. She looked little better than my father, just as tired, just as worried. Dad, what's going on? I couldn't hold back once we all sat at the table. Why such urgency? My father sighed deeply, looked at my mother, then turned his gaze to me. Maxime, he said. I spoke with him last night after our conversation. I tensed. And? He denied everything, of course, my father said with a bitter smile. Claimed he had no idea what I was talking about, that you were making things up, trying to dump your problems on him. I nodded. That was exactly the reaction I had expected. But then my father paused. Then I told him we had gone to the police, that a fraud report was already filed, and that if it turned out he was behind it, I would personally make sure he got the maximum sentence. I groaned inwardly. This was exactly what I had feared, that father would act head-on and scare Maxime. And what did he say? I asked, though I already guessed. At first, nothing. Father shook his head. He just laughed and left. And then, around 3 a.m, I got a call from the office. The alarm had gone off. I tensed, feeling I was about to hear something very unpleasant. When I arrived, Father continued, I found someone had broken in through the back door, disabled the cameras, and taken the documents. What documents? A chill ran down my spine. All related to our business for the past 5 years. Accounting reports, contracts, tax declarations, everything. I exchanged a quick look with Pavel. He frowned, clearly grasping the seriousness of the situation. You think it was Maxime? I asked. Who else? Father said with a bitter smile. He has the keys to the office. He knows the alarm codes, and he knows what's in those documents. I didn't fully understand where he was going. What's so special in them? My father lowered his eyes. For the first time in my memory, he looked embarrassed. Let's just say our bookkeeping hasn't always been spotless, especially during hard years, the crisis, the pandemic. We had to optimize taxes. Optimize. Pavel said the word neutrally, but I caught the meaning. In his field, tax optimization was often a euphemism for not entirely legal schemes of tax evasion. Exactly, my father nodded. Nothing criminal, just a gray area. But if those documents reach the tax authorities or the prosecutor's office, we'll be in serious trouble, and Maxime knows it. I began to piece the picture together. He handled your legal affairs, saw these schemes, and now what? He's blackmailing. You? Not yet. My father rubbed the bridge of his nose, but I think it's a matter of time. He knows I accused him of apartment fraud, and now he has leverage. I leaned back in my chair, trying to absorb the situation. Maxime wasn't just trying to trick me and my parents with the apartment. He had prepared a backup plan in case his scheme was exposed, and now that plan was in motion. What are you going to do? I asked my father. He sighed. I don't know if he demands we withdraw the fraud complaint, give up claims to the apartment. We may have to agree. No. I shook my head. We will not give in to blackmail. This is only the beginning. If we yield now, he'll demand more and more. Easy for you to say, Father snapped. It's not your business at risk, not your reputation. Not only your reputation is at risk, Dad, I retorted. He tried to deprive you and Mom of your home, used me and my documents for fraud. That's a criminal offense, and he must answer for it. Father was about to argue, but Pavel, who had been quietly listening, intervened. Viktor Nikolaevich, he said calmly, I understand your concern, but Anna is right. Yielding to blackmail is not a solution. It will only worsen things. My father gave him a wary look. And what do you propose, young man? First of all, not to panic. Pavel spoke confidently, professionally. Yes, Maxim has documents that could compromise you, But that doesn't mean he'll rush to the tax office right away. Most likely he's waiting, preparing for negotiations. We need to move faster than him. How? My father asked. We will continue. The apartment fraud investigation, Pavel explained. We already have a police report. The property registration suspended. Now we must gather evidence against Maxime and at the same time prepare for potential tax issues. Prepare, Father repeated. How? Conduct an internal audit, identify all weak points, prepare explanations, maybe even prepay some taxes. Pavel spoke, with expertise. I'm not a tax law specialist, but I have colleagues who could help. My father thought for a moment, then nodded. Sounds reasonable. But what if Maxime still goes to the tax office before we're ready? Then we'll have countercharges, Pavel replied. Apartment fraud, theft of office documents. That's a serious crime, and if we prove he did it, his problems will outweigh your tax troubles. I looked at Pavel with gratitude. He not only offered a concrete plan, but also gave hope that the situation wasn't as hopeless as it seemed. My father also seemed to regain some spirit. All right, he said after a pause. Let's try your approach, but if it doesn't work, we'll have to negotiate with Maxime. Negotiation can be a last resort, Pavel agreed. But from a position of strength, not weakness, when we hold all the cards. We spent about an hour discussing details. Pavel took notes, asked questions about my father's business, the nature of the tax optimization, which documents exactly Maxim had taken. The more we talked, the clearer the picture became. For years, Maxim had been preparing for this moment. As a company lawyer, he collected information, studied vulnerabilities, waited for the right chance. And when the conflict between me and my father escalated, he decided to act. Maybe the original plan was simpler: to scare father, force him to agree to sell the dacha, take his share of the deal. But when I resisted, when I reminded that the apartment legally belonged to me, Maxim chose another route: go to the bank, use my data to sell the apartment, and if exposed, fall back on blackmail with the stolen documents. A cunning, calculated plan, but with one weak point. He didn't expect me to fight so firmly, to find support in Pavel, to unite with my father despite our disagreements. When Pavel and I were leaving, father suddenly pulled me aside. Anna, he said quietly, I must apologize for my words, for saying you're a disgrace to the family, for the things about children. I was wrong. I looked at him in surprise. I couldn't remember my father ever apologizing to me. Usually, if he was wrong, he just pretended nothing happened. Thank you, Dad, I replied sincerely. It means a lot to me. He nodded awkwardly, then added, glancing at Pavel, who was waiting by the door. He's a good man, and a good lawyer. You chose well. That was probably the most approval I could hope for from my father. And it was enough. Yes, Dad, I smiled. He really is. On the way back, Pavel was thoughtful. I could see he was analyzing the situation, calculating options. What are you thinking about? I asked as we approached my house. How strangely everything has turned out, he answered with a faint smile. Just a week ago, your father didn't even want to see you at his anniversary. And today he's asking for help, apologizing, even approving of me. Did you notice? I couldn't help smiling. Of course, I nodded. Hard not to notice when you're looked at so intently. As a future son-in-law, I blushed. Pavel and I had never spoken about our relationship status. Yes, we spent a lot of time together. He helped me with the children, supported me in hard moments. But we hadn't even kissed, let alone anything more. Pavel, I began hesitantly. I don't know what will happen next. This whole situation with Maxim, the apartment, the documents. I can't promise anything. I'm not asking for anything, Anya. He gently interrupted me. I just want you to know, I am here, and I will stay here as long as you need me. Without conditions, without expectations, just here. His words touched me to the very depths of my soul. After all of Maxim's manipulations, after the conflict with my father, such simple, pure support seemed like something incredible. "Thank you," I whispered softly, and for a moment placed my hand on top of his, lying on the steering wheel. We drove silently to my house. At the entrance, Pavel stopped the car and turned to me. "See you in the evening?" he asked. "I'll call my colleagues regarding your father's tax questions. Maybe there will be news." "Of course." I nodded. "Come for dinner. The children will be happy to see you." He smiled, and suddenly I realized that for the first time in a long time, I felt hope. Despite all the problems, despite Maxim and his intrigues, despite the difficult relationship with my father, I had children whom I loved more than life. There was Pavel, whose support seemed inexhaustible. There was strength and determination to fight for my happiness. Perhaps the divorce with Maxim was not the end, but the beginning of a new life in which I could finally be myself without looking back at other people's expectations and demands. But this story was not yet over, and as it turned out, the hardest part was still ahead. The day passed in hustle and bustle. I had to pick up the children from the neighbor, cook lunch, help Polina with her homework, play with Artyom. Ordinary parental concerns, which for a while distracted me from thoughts of Maxim, the stolen documents, and possible blackmail. In the evening, as promised, Pavel came and brought small gifts for the children. For Polina, a new book from the Addis series she was currently reading, and for Artyom, a set to assemble a small model airplane. The children were delighted, especially Artyom, who immediately dragged Pavel to his room to start building together. I watched how they bent over the details, how patiently Pavel explained to my son what goes where, how he supported him when something didn't work out. And my heart filled with warmth. This is what a family should be like. Support, care, patience. Something my children and I had never seen from Maxim. After dinner, when the children went to bed, Pavel and I sat in the kitchen. He told me that he had contacted a colleague, a tax law specialist, and he agreed to help with my father's problem. It was necessary to assess the scale of possible violations, prepare a defense strategy, and maybe even conduct negotiations with the tax office about voluntary additional payments and minimizing fines. "Your father must be ready to pay, and a lot," Pavel warned. "But if we act correctly, we can avoid criminal prosecution." I nodded. "The main thing now is to stop Maxim, not to let him use these documents for blackmail." "Agreed." Pavel nodded. "And I have an idea, but it's a little risky." I tensed. "What kind?" "We can use his own weapon against him," Pavel explained. "He has documents compromising your father, but we have evidence of his fraud with the apartment, plus the potential accusation of stealing documents from the office. If we combine everything, we can offer him a deal." "A deal?" I repeated. "What kind?" "He returns the documents, abandons his blackmail plans, admits the attempted apartment fraud, and we, without pressing theft charges, help hush up the fake sale story," I thought. The plan sounded logical, but there was something about it that worried me. And if he doesn't agree, if he decides the risk is too high and immediately goes to the tax authorities with the documents? "That's why I said the plan is risky," Pavel admitted. "But judging by what I've learned about Maxim, from your stories and from what we've observed, he's not the kind who goes all in. Rather, he'll look for a way to get out of the situation with minimal losses, and our proposal may seem like that way to him." I wanted to answer, but at that moment my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. I pressed the answer button and cautiously said, "Hello?" "Anna Viktorovna," came a woman's voice. "My name is Elena. I am the senior nurse at City Hospital. Number 3. Your father, Viktor Nikolaevich Kuznetsov, has been admitted with a suspected heart attack." I felt the blood drain from my face. "What? When?" "About an hour ago," the nurse replied. His condition is stable but serious. The doctors recommend that relatives come. I'm leaving immediately, I said, already jumping up from my chair. Tell me, is his life in danger right now? No, there is no immediate threat to life, but the situation is serious. Please come. I hung up and rushed to dress while explaining the situation to Pavel. I'll go with you, he said firmly. And what about the children? I froze. In panic, I had completely forgotten about them. They could not be left alone, and the neighbor who sometimes looked after them had left for the weekend. Maybe you should call your mother, suggested Pavel. I can drive her here, and then we'll go to the hospital. Yes, exactly. I nodded gratefully. Mom should be at home, if she hadn't gone with Dad. I dialed her number. Luckily, she answered almost immediately. Her voice sounded anxious but calm. Yes, the hospital already called me, she said. I'm about to go there, but first I need to collect some things for your father. Mom, could you come to us? Stay with the children while Pavel and I go to the hospital? Of course, she agreed right away. I'll be at your place in half an hour. Pavel volunteered to meet my mother and bring her so I could stay with the kids. I was grateful for this offer. Waiting half an hour, knowing that my father was in the hospital, was unbearable, but I couldn't leave the children alone. When Mom arrived, I saw that she was holding herself together only by sheer willpower. Her face was pale, and in her eyes was fear she tried to hide behind outward calm. How is he? I asked, hugging her. I don't know. They didn't give details on the phone, she replied. But if they say heart attack, it's serious, Anya. I quickly explained to the children that Grandpa wasn't feeling well, that Pavel and I were going to visit him, and Grandma would stay with them. Polina, sensitive beyond her years, immediately understood that the matter was more serious than I was saying, but didn't ask questions. She just hugged me tightly before I left and whispered, Grandpa will be fine, Mom. I know. I hoped. She was right. At the hospital, we were met by the same nurse who had called and taken us to the cardiology department, where my father was under medical supervision. Your father suffered a mild heart attack, explained the cardiologist, a young man with tired but attentive eyes. We carried out the necessary procedures. His condition has stabilized, but he needs complete rest, no stress, a strict regimen, and medication. Can I see him? I asked. Yes, but not for long. He is very weak. My father was placed in a separate ward. When I entered, he was lying with his eyes closed, so unusually defenseless, with tubes and monitors connected to his body, always strong, authoritative, decisive, and suddenly, so vulnerable. I carefully sat down on a chair next to the bed, took his hand. The hand was cold, but I felt a weak squeeze. He was conscious. Papa, I whispered softly. He slowly opened his eyes and looked at me with a clouded gaze. Anna. His voice was barely audible. You came? Of course I came. I squeezed his hand. How are you feeling? Lousy. He tried to smile, but it turned into only a weak grimace. Never thought I'd collapse like this. What happened? Were you at home or in the office? In the office. He sighed. Maxim called me, wanted to meet, to talk about the documents. I went, and when he started saying exactly what he wanted, I felt bad. Pain in the chest, couldn't breathe. He called the ambulance. I tensed. Maxim, so he had already started acting, had already begun the blackmail, and it drove my father to a heart attack. What did he want? I asked carefully, remembering the doctor's warning that my father must not be agitated. Everything, my father said with a bitter smirk. The dasha, a share in the business, money, in exchange for the documents and giving up claims to the apartment. He said that if I didn't agree, he would not only take the documents to the tax office, but also accuse me of participating in the apartment fraud. Allegedly, it was our joint idea. I felt anger boiling inside me. My ex-husband was not just trying to deceive us. He was ready to destroy my father, the man who had given him work, trusted him with his business. Papa, don't think about this now. I tried to speak calmly. You need to rest, recover. Pavel and I will deal with Maxime. No, Anna. My father tried to sit up, but immediately fell back onto the pillow, clearly exhausted. This is my problem. I'll handle it. Right now, you must think only about your health, I said firmly. Everything else can wait. I will not let Maxime destroy our family, our lives, I promise. My father looked at me for a long time, then slowly nodded. You've changed, Anna. You've become stronger. I had to, I replied simply. We talked a little more. Father told me the details of his conversation with Maxime, explained exactly which documents had been stolen, what risks they carried for the business. I listened carefully, memorizing the details. Then Father began to grow tired, and I decided it was time to leave. I'll come tomorrow, I promised as I stood up. Rest, Papa, and don't worry, we'll manage everything. Leaving the room, I found Pavel waiting for me in the corridor. How is he? Pavel asked with genuine concern. Weak, but conscious, I answered. Doctors say with proper treatment and no stress he should make a full recovery. Good news, Pavel nodded. And what about Maxime? I told him what I had learned from Father, about the blackmail, the demands, about how it had affected Father's health. We have to stop him, I said firmly. This is no longer just about money or an apartment. This is about my father's health, maybe even his life. Pavel nodded thoughtfully. I understand, but we must act very carefully. Maxime clearly won't stop until he gets what he wants, and he could be dangerous. What do you suggest? Do you remember the plan I mentioned? To use his own weapon against him? I think it's time to put it into action, but with some modifications. We went down to the hospital cafe, where Pavel laid out his plan in detail. It was risky, even dangerous, but it could work. And most importantly, it did not require my father's involvement, who now needed only peace to recover. The next day, we began implementing the plan. The first step was to contact Maxime and arrange a meeting. I hesitated for a long time, not knowing if I could talk to him calmly after what he had done to my father. But there was no choice. I dialed his number from the new phone Pavel had bought for this purpose. Maxime answered after the third ring. Yes. His voice sounded wary. Of course, he didn't recognize the number. Maxim, it's Anna, I said, trying to keep my voice calm, though inside everything boiled with anger. We need to talk. Anna. There was surprise in his voice. What an unexpected call. I thought you'd be busy taking care of your father. His tone, that feigned interest, made me sick with disgust. He knew he had driven my father to a heart attack, and now pretended to sympathize. That's exactly why I'm calling, I answered evenly. You spoke to Father before he became ill, and I want to discuss your proposals. A long pause. Maxime clearly had not expected this turn. You want to make a deal? There was disbelief in his voice. I want to discuss options, I replied evasively. My father can't be stressed right now. His condition is still serious. So yes, I'm ready to hear your terms. Good. He sounded pleased with the turn. When and where? Today at 6 p.m. at the Café Ute on Central Street. It's a quiet place. We can talk peacefully. All right, Maxime agreed. I'll be there at 6. I hung up and looked at Pavel, who had been beside me the whole time but had not interfered. He agreed, I said. 6 o'clock. Café Ute. Perfect, Pavel nodded. Now we need to prepare. We don't have much time. Preparation took the whole day. Pavel contacted his colleagues. I called the cafe management to reserve a suitable table, private enough for a serious conversation but not too isolated. Then we stopped by the hospital to visit father. His condition had stabilized. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. "Don't tell him about our plan," Pavel warned me before we entered the ward. "He can't be agitated right now." I nodded. Of course, father didn't need to know what we were going to do. He had only just begun to recover. Any agitation could trigger another attack. Father was happy to see us. He looked a little better than yesterday, though still very weak. We talked about his health, what the doctors had said, about ordinary everyday things. I told him how the children had drawn a card for him with get well wishes, how mother was baking his favorite apple pie to bring when the doctors allowed. Father listened, sometimes smiled, but I saw his thoughts were elsewhere. At one point, he took my hand and quietly asked, "What about Maxime? Has he contacted you?" I tensed. I didn't want to lie, but I couldn't tell the truth either. "No, not yet," I said, technically not lying. After all, it was I who contacted Maxime, not he me. "Don't think about it now, Papa. You need to rest." He nodded, but from his eyes I could tell. He didn't believe the problem with Maxime would just vanish. And he was right. It wouldn't. But Pavel and I intended to solve it. By the evening I started to feel nervous. The plan had seemed good when we discussed it. But now, when the time came to act, doubts began to creep in. What if Maxime didn't take the bait? What if our plan failed? Then what? Pavel seemed to sense my anxiety. "It will be fine, Anya," he said as we drove up to the cafe. "Remember, we are on the side of truth, and truth always wins." I smiled faintly. I wanted to believe that in real life things were as simple as in children's fairy tales. We arrived at the cafe half an hour before the appointed time. The table I had reserved was in a corner of the hall, partially hidden by a decorative partition, but clearly visible from the bar, where our assistant, Pavel's colleague specializing in such delicate situations, was to sit. I sat at the table, Pavel at the bar, pretending to be just another customer, not connected to me. The plan was simple. I meet Maxime, talk with him, and the conversation is recorded with a hidden recorder. If he admitted to blackmail and the attempted apartment fraud, we would have evidence for the police. Maxime arrived exactly at 6, looked around the hall, noticed me, and walked to the table. He looked confident, like a man who knew he was in control of the situation. "Anna," he nodded, sitting across from me. "You look tired. Hard to be a caring daughter." I ignored his sarcasm. "Let's get straight to the point, Maxim. I know what you want from my father. The dacha, a share in the business, money. I'm here to discuss those terms." He raised his eyebrows slightly. "Straightforward. I like that. Yes, I want compensation for all the years I worked for your father for a pittance. I deserve more." "And so you decided to blackmail him with stolen documents." I tried to speak calmly but firmly. "Not blackmail, but offering a mutually beneficial deal," he smirked. "Documents for assets. All fair." "Fair?" I couldn't hold back a bitter laugh. "You stole documents, tried to cheat us with the apartment, drove my father to a heart attack, and you call that fair?" Maxime shrugged. "Business. Nothing personal. By the way, about the apartment. I'm sorry it turned out that way. I didn't expect you to figure out the scheme so quickly. I thought that by the time you realized what had happened, the deal would already be done. So you admit it was a fraud." I tried to keep my voice even so the recorder would clearly capture his words. "Let's call it creative use of legal loopholes." He smiled that charming smile which once made me weak, but now only filled me with disgust. "I used your data, your digital signature to formalize the deal. Technically, yes, it's fraud. But if everything had gone smoothly, your parents would simply have moved into another apartment, not so expensive but without encumbrances, and the difference I would have used for investments." "For investments?" I asked with irony. Or for another business project that will never succeed. His face twisted with anger for a moment, but he quickly pulled himself together. That doesn't matter. What matters is that now we're at an impasse. Your father has health problems. You have problems with the apartment, and I have documents that can cause serious problems for your father's business. So let's discuss how we can resolve this situation to mutual benefit. What exactly do you want? I asked directly. As I already told your father, the dacha, registered to you, 20% of his business, and $500,000 in cash. In return, I give back the documents and forget about the apartment. I stared at him, not believing my ears. He spoke of it so casually, so matter-of-factly, as if proposing an ordinary business deal, not blackmail. And if we refuse? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Then the documents will be sent to the tax office and the prosecutor's office. Your father's business will collapse and he'll face criminal charges for tax evasion. And the apartment? Well, we'll find a way to revive the deal. I have connections in Rosreister, you know that. I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. Everything was going according to plan. Maxim had confessed to the apartment fraud, the blackmail, and the threats. The recorder should have captured it all. Now I just had to make the final step. All right, I said after a pause. I'll talk to my father when he's better. I think he'll agree to your terms, but I need guarantees that you'll return the documents. All of them. Maxim smiled. Of course, we can arrange an exchange, documents for assets, officially, with a notary. And one more thing, I added. You said you used my digital signature to process the apartment deal. How did you get access to it? He smirked. You always had predictable passwords, Anna. The date of our wedding, Polina's birthday. I just restored access to your state services account, and the rest was easy. Weren't you afraid of being caught? That this would come out? Honestly, no. He shrugged. I thought of everything. The deal was supposed to go through. Quickly. Money transferred. Apartment sold. By the time your parents realized what had happened, it would have been too late to change anything, and proving my involvement would be nearly impossible. I used anonymous proxies, encrypted channels, all traces erased. I nodded, pretending to be impressed by his foresight. I see. And when do you want an answer to your proposal? The sooner the better, he replied. But considering your father's condition, let's say in a week. By then he should be well enough to decide. Fine, a week. Maxim finished his coffee, stood up, and smirked. It was nice talking to you, Anna. Glad to see you've become more pragmatic. I didn't respond, just watched him leave. As the cafe door closed behind him, Pavel approached my table. Did it work? He asked, sitting across from me. I nodded and pulled a small recorder from my pocket. I think so. He confessed to everything. The apartment fraud, the blackmail, the threats. He even explained how he forged my digital signature. Pavel plugged in headphones, listening intently to the recording, sometimes nodding, sometimes frowning. At last, he set the headphones aside and smiled. Perfect. Everything's clear. This will be enough for the police. A man who had been sitting at the bar the whole time came over. Pavel's colleague Sergei, an experienced criminal lawyer. I heard it all, he said, shaking my hand. We were ready to step in if Maxim turned aggressive, but he stayed in line. Clever guy knows where the limits are. What next? I asked, looking at Pavel. Next, we go to the police, he said. With this recording and a statement about blackmail and fraud. At the same time, we'll file a report about the stolen documents from your father's office. With this evidence, the police will have no choice but to open a case. And what if Maxim rushes to hand the documents to the tax office? I asked nervously. If he acts quickly before we respond? I doubt it. Sergei shook his head. From what I heard, He thinks he controls the situation, that you and your father will agree to his terms. Why burn bridges? Besides, Pavel added, I spoke with a colleague in the tax office, confidentially. She's been warned that an anonymous tip may come in against your father's company and knows to contact us first before starting any checks. I looked at both men with gratitude. They had thought through everything, every detail, every possible turn. With allies like this, Maxim didn't stand a chance. The next day, we filed a police report. The detective listened carefully to our story, reviewed the recording, and checked the documents proving the attempted apartment fraud. Serious case, he said, leaning back. Fraud, blackmail, theft of documents. If confirmed, your ex-husband faces real prison time. How fast can you act? Pavel asked. We fear he may try to flee or destroy evidence. The detective nodded. With evidence like this, I can get a search and arrest warrant within 24 hours. But we'll need your father's testimony. He's the direct victim of blackmail. My father is in the hospital after a heart attack, I reminded him. He can't be stressed. I understand, the detective said thoughtfully. But his statement is important. Maybe when he's stronger. Of course, I agreed. We spent another hour discussing details, planning next steps. It was decided the police would search Maxim's home and office, hoping to find the stolen documents. If discovered, that would further prove his guilt. By the time we left the station, it was late. Pavel offered me a ride home, and in the car we talked about the day, the prospects, the risks. Do you think we'll succeed? I asked. Maxim isn't simple. He has connections, money, legal knowledge. He does, Pavel agreed. But we have something stronger, the truth and proof of that truth. With such evidence, even the slickest lawyer can't save him. I wanted to believe him, that justice would prevail, that Maxim would finally pay. But deep inside, I still feared he'd escape punishment once again. The next days passed in tense anticipation. The police searched his home and office. The stolen documents weren't found, but they uncovered other evidence. Drafts of forged papers, my account passwords, notes of his plan. Maxim was arrested in his office, in front of colleagues and clients. The detective said he remained calm, with a contemptuous smirk, certain his lawyers would free him. But he was wrong. The evidence was too strong, undeniable. The case went to the prosecutor's office, and hearings began. The stolen documents were never recovered, but it didn't matter. Fraud and blackmail charges alone were enough to send him to prison for many years. Meanwhile, my father slowly recovered. When he was stronger, the detective visited the hospital for his testimony. Father recounted everything, how Maxim threatened to destroy his business unless he agreed to the terms. His words became another nail in Maxim's coffin. 2 weeks after the arrest, once father was discharged, we all gathered at my parents' home. Mother cooked a celebratory dinner. The children were happy to see their grandfather healthy. For the first time in ages, I felt at peace. I want to make a toast, Father said, lifting a glass of non-alcoholic wine allowed by his doctors. To our family, that we are together, no matter what. We all raised our glasses. I looked at my parents, the children, and at Pavel, who had become so close to us during these hard weeks. Yes, we were a family, not perfect, scarred, but real. And one more thing, Father added, looking straight at me. I want to apologize to you, Anna, for calling you the disgrace of the family, for not supporting you when you divorced Maxim, for not seeing what a wonderful woman, mother and daughter you've become. Forgive me. Tears welled in my eyes. Dad? No, let me finish. He raised a hand. I was blind, caring more about outsiders' opinions than my own daughter's and grandchildren's well-being. I valued money and business over family, and almost lost everything. If not for you, for your strength and resolve, Maxim would have destroyed us. You saved us. Me, your mother, our home, our business, and I am proud of you, my daughter." I couldn't hold back the tears. I had waited so many years for these words, so many years striving for his approval. And now, after everything, he had finally said what I longed to hear. "Thank you, Dad," I said quietly. "But I didn't do it all alone. Pavel helped. The police, your friends, we all managed together." Father nodded, shifting his gaze to Pavel. "I want to thank you, young man, for standing by my daughter in a difficult time, for helping all of us." Pavel smiled shyly. "No thanks needed, Viktor Nikolaevich. I just did what I thought was right." But Father still raised his glass higher. "To you, Pavel, for your help, your support, and for making my daughter happy." I felt my cheeks flush. Pavel and I hadn't yet spoken about our relationship. Everything had happened so quickly, so unexpectedly. But Father, with his bluntness, voiced what everyone already saw. Pavel looked at me, his eyes asking a question, and I gave a barely noticeable nod. Yes, he made me happy, and I wanted it to continue. After dinner, when the children were asleep and my parents had gone to rest, Pavel and I went out to the balcony. The night was warm and starry, with a light breeze carrying the scent of blooming linden from the park. "Your father approves of me," Pavel said with a slight smile. "Yes," I nodded, "and that means a lot. He rarely approves of anyone." We stood in silence, gazing at the stars. Then Pavel turned to me, took my hands. "Anna," he began seriously, "I know everything happened very quickly, that you've just been through a difficult period, that you only recently divorced, that you have children and responsibilities. I don't want to rush things or pressure you, but I must tell you, you've become very important to me, you and your children." I looked into his eyes, so sincere and warm, and felt a heat spreading inside. "You've become important. To us too, Pavel, to me, to Polina, to Artyom. We've gotten used to you." "Just gotten used?" He smiled, but there was worry in his eyes. "No, not just. I've not only gotten used. I feel something for you I've never felt before. Not even for Maxim. Not even at the beginning of our marriage. This is something deeper, more real. I love you, Anna," he said simply, "and I want to be with you, with all of you, if you'll let me." Instead of answering, I leaned in and kissed him. Our first kiss, gentle, careful, but full of promise. A promise of love, support, loyalty, everything I had lacked in my marriage with Maxim. When we pulled away, I saw so much love and tenderness in his eyes that my heart stopped. "I love you too, Pavel," I whispered, "and I want you to always be with us." In that moment, I realized that all the trials, all the pain and fear had not been in vain. They had led me to this man, to this love, to this new beginning. The trial of Maxim took place a few months later. He was found guilty of fraud, blackmail, and attempted theft of documents. The sentence, 5 years in a general regime colony. Not as long as I'd have liked, but enough for him to realize his mistakes, and for us to live peacefully without fearing his return. The stolen documents were never found, but it no longer mattered. Following Pavel's and his colleagues' advice, Father carried out a full audit of his business, uncovered every issue, paid additional taxes where necessary. It cost him a lot of money, but preserved his reputation and freedom. We kept the dasha. Every summer I went there with the children. Pavel often joined us, sometimes my parents too. We picked berries, swam in the river, grilled kebabs. Simple, joys that once seemed trivial, but now became more precious than ever. A year later, Pavel and I married. A modest ceremony, only the closest people. Polina was bridesmaid, Artyom, clumsy but serious, carried the rings. Father walked me down the aisle. For the first time, I saw tears in his eyes. "I'm happy for you, daughter," he said as we danced at the wedding. "You deserve this happiness. You always have." I hugged him, throat tightening with emotion. "Thank you, Dad, for everything." He knew what I meant. For supporting me during Maxim's trial, for helping with the children while I worked, for accepting Pavel as family, for finally seeing in me not just a daughter, but an independent, strong woman. Life went on. There were joys and hardships. Polina entered a prestigious gymnasium. Artyom started first grade. I received a promotion at work. Pavel opened his own law firm. We bought a house, not in the city center but in a good district, with a garden where the children could play, with a spacious kitchen where we loved to gather. Sometimes, especially in quiet evenings when the children slept and Pavel and I sat on the veranda, I recalled that conversation with my father that had changed everything. His words that I was a disgrace to the family, his refusal to invite us to his jubilee, my calm but firm reply, reminding him that the apartment they lived in legally belonged to me. Funny how one decision, one moment, can change the entire course of life. If I had stayed silent, accepted his words, not reminded him about the apartment, Maxim would never have found out, never invented his scheme. Father would never have ended up in the hospital with a heart attack. I might never have met Pavel, or met him under different circumstances. But life unfolded the way it did, and I regretted nothing, not even the pain, fear, or tears, because they led me here, to this life, to this happiness. As for Father, he never knew what I did after our conversation. He never knew that I went to a lawyer, drew up a deed of gift for the apartment where he and Mother lived, and transferred it to their name, giving up all rights to it, freely, forever. I never told him. Not then when he called in panic, thinking I'd sold the apartment to strangers. Not later when everything came out and Maxim ended up in prison. Not even now, years later when our relationship finally became what I'd always dreamed of, based on love, respect, and trust. Some gifts are better made in silence, not for gratitude or recognition, but out of love. Even if that love sometimes hurts, even if it's not always noticed or appreciated, because true love doesn't demand reciprocity, thanks, or recognition. True love simply exists, always, no matter what. Like my love for Father, like his love for me. Imperfect, sometimes painful, but real. And that was the most important thing I understood through the years. Family is not a perfect picture for social media, not a source of pride before friends or colleagues. Family is the people who stay when times are hard, who forgive even when it hurts, who love even when it's difficult. My family was like that, imperfect, with its flaws and conflicts, but real. And I was grateful for every flaw, every crack, because it was through those cracks that light entered, the light of understanding, forgiveness, true love. 5 years later, we all gathered again at my parents' house. My parents, the children, Pavel and I. This time for Father's 65th birthday, a milestone, a reason for pride and joy. There were many guests, relatives, friends, colleagues. Father had stepped back from business, handing leadership to his deputy, not Maxim, of course, but remained a respected figure in the city's business circles. Everyone congratulated him, gave warm words, brought gifts. He accepted with dignity, but without the arrogance he once had. The years, the illness, all we had endured had softened him, made him more human, closer to family. When it was time for toasts, Father rose, looked around the hall, and stopped his gaze on me. "I want to raise this glass to my daughter Anna," he said loudly, so all could hear. "To the woman who taught me that family is not only business, not only money, not only status. Family is love, support, forgiveness. 5 years ago, I called her the disgrace of our family. Those were the stupidest, most unjust words I've ever spoken, because in truth, she is the pride of our family, my pride. I love you, daughter. Tears streamed down my cheeks. Pavel squeezed my hand. The children looked confused, never having heard this story, never knowing what we had been through. I love you too, Dad, I said, rising and hugging him. I always have and always will. In that moment, I knew the circle was complete, that all the pain, fear, and doubts had not been in vain. They had led us here, to true understanding, true forgiveness, true love. And that was the most important thing. Not apartments, not dachas, not money, not status, but simple human love, imperfect, sometimes painful, but real. The only thing that matters in this complicated world. And I was grateful for it, for every flaw, every crack, because it was through those cracks that light entered. The light of understanding, forgiveness, true love. The light that shines even in the darkest times, even when hope seems gone, even when everything around is collapsing. A light that never fades because it lives inside us, in our hearts, in our love, in our ability to forgive and move forward. The light that makes us a family,